y'all, this is the rod holder, port, front, or midship, and this is the boot that was attached to it. You can see the foam that it was embedded in. One from the this port rear, and you might be able to see that it's a little bit tore up. This one looked actually pretty good, but it is split. I think you can. Starboard rear, it was really tore up. This is a video of a project that I undertook on my 2002 Key West 1720 center console to reseal the factory rod holders to the gunnels. In this part of the video, you're seeing me working. I'm having to use my GoPro camera with the iPhone screen to see what I'm doing, trying to make an opening so that I can route some new drain lines. The foam fill of the Key West from the factory had pretty well sealed up all of the lines in this area behind the live well. So I'm using a piece of PVC pipe with teeth cut into it, trying to cut through the foam to make a good opening. And it looks like I finally got it there. The Key West factory installs a drain line on every one of their rod holders. There's a rubber boot on the end of it, and they run a polypropylene hose down to the bilge. You can see the original drain lines there in this picture. I could not reuse them because they were encapsulated in foam and could not be pulled out. Here I'm using a stiff section of air brake hose as a feed hose, if you will, running it up through the hole I just created, going outside and attached polypropylene hose, pulling it through to make sure I can get it through, and there it is. So now I know that I can route the new drain lines to the bilge. This is the PVC pipe that I made. It's a 1/2 inch PVC pipe, cut the teeth in the end of it, and working through the port midship rod holder hole, you'll see how I was working around the boot that had been left by the previous owner when they realized their mistake. They had just jammed the rod holder down on the boot, and any water that went into the rod holder was apparently just running down into the bilge, or running into the hull, and would eventually run down to the bilge, according to what Tom Marlowe has told me. Using a larger piece of pipe, this is probably 1 inch pipe, and a shop vac, I sucked out the dislodged, cut up pieces of foam so I would have a clear area to work, to be able to see my progress. The idea is to chisel away enough of the foam that I can get the new boot, the elbow attached to the drain line, and get them routed to the bilge. Here I'm using a pair of extra long needle nose pliers to grab the boot, the old boot, and pull it out. That's the boot you saw at the beginning of the video. You'll notice the gap between the hole and top of the foam. It left enough room to work the new hose back to the corner and eventually down into the bilge. And that's the new hose that you're seeing there. Here I'm working the hose out through the rod holder hole. Attaching the polypropylene coming from the other hole to my pull hose, pushing it back down through, and in the bilge pulling the hose out. Now I have a drain line from port midship into the bilge. The starboard midship rod holder looked to be in good shape. Here I'm water testing it, and I'm seeing water drain all the way through, so I decided I was not going to do anything with replacing that drain line. I very carefully worked the flange up just a little bit where I could get a slight gap, maybe 3/16 between the flange and the top of the gunnel, and using 3M 4200 I'm sealing the flange to the gunnel.
Alright, there's sealant all the way around.
I don't know what it was with this project, but it seemed like I would only be able to get a small part of it finished before I would get rained out. And you're going to notice that later on in this video. This is the second or third day of messing with it. I'm not in the backyard anymore. I'm on the side of the house where there's a little bit more shade. I've just used a plastic scraper to remove as much of the 4200 from around the flange after it was tightened down, and now cleaning up with some acetone.
That looks pretty daggone good. Now I'll finish polishing this up once that 4200 dries.
This photo is looking down through the port rear rod holder. It's self-explanatory. You can freeze the video if you want to study the picture. At this point in the project, I've got one drain line run, one that I've decided did not need any additional work other than sealing. I'm getting ready to run the drain line for this port aft. There's my pull hose, putting a new hose onto it, and we'll pull that down into the bilge fairly easy. However, you'll see that the hose somehow got kinked and gave me a little bit of a fit getting it into the bilge. That kink will be cut out because the hose will be cut closer over to the edge, just like the original ones were. Here I'm working on the starboard aft. This was very clear inside. You'll see a picture later. Very easy to get this hose routed. Rain forced me to stop, so I moved inside. Here I am with the new boots and the brass fittings. They were not available in nylon, and I had to wait for them to come in. Another one of the delays on this project. Here I'm applying 4200 to the fitting, and I will push that into each boot to make the seal. The two straight fittings are for the aft positions, the 90-degree for the midship port. You can see that it's just inserted enough to let water flow freely. Okay, here's a view through the starboard aft rod holder. It's pretty self-explanatory.
Okay, another day on this project. Let's get this.
Okay, I'm going to jump in on the voiceover, cutting the tubing, attaching the boot to the tube, removing the tape. All this is self-explanatory. Tape to keep the rain from getting in the night before, and then getting the boot onto the rod holder. Making sure that the tube goes all the way into the bilge, propping the flange up where I can get some 4200 around it. Make sure I get a good seal. I still had a very small tip on the tube at that point. I probably should have opened it up a little bit more so I could have some 4200 emerging out from outside the flange, but I know it's sealed inside. Tightening her down, taking a final look.
I know it's caulked on the inside.
Okay, so that wraps up the starboard side of the boat. Time for the port side. Here I'm attaching the boot fitting to the drain line and the boot to the rod holder itself. Making sure everything is going to fit before I get out the 4200. Had some ants in the boat from the boat sitting on the side underneath the trees. It's killing a few of them. Here we're getting the 4200 completely around the hole and around the screw holes. Lining the screw holes up and tightening it down. Cleaning up with the scraper and finishing up with some acetone. 3 are done. And now to the last one. And it starts to rain again. Put the boot and footing into the drain line. Boot onto the rod holder. Make sure that everything is going to fit. Quickly get some 4200 on as I'm getting soaked. Press it in place, get the screws started, and tighten it up. Scrape away any excess. And again, final cleanup with acetone.
Thankfully, that project is now done. Hope it's provided some tips, maybe provoked some thoughts. Regardless, appreciate you watching.